Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to take more of your questions in a segment of Ask Judy. If you are enjoying these, please do hit like and subscribe. And if you'd like to know when I'm going to post another one, please do hit the subscription bell. Next question is from someone who goes by Raven's Dawn. I've got a question. Having been born in 1965, my two childhood role models were both Marys. Mary Ellen Walton and Mary Ingalls. My child's mind accepted both shows' differences and similarities as I did my family. Grandma and grandpa on mom's side, mama and papa on dad's. Two different worlds, yet the same family. How was it on your end, though? Both shows must have been competing at some time along the way. Did any of the cast from either show ever meet? The Waltons was on first, so I always like to say that Little House on the Prairie was kind of a copycat. That we paved the way, and then shows when other companies, other networks, when they found out that family programming did have a place, that people were interested in watching it, that other people looked to jump on the bandwagon and create their own family programming that would speak to the audience. And clearly with Little House on the Prairie, that was the case. We did not specifically cross paths like in any way in the filming as regular cast members. I have met most of that cast at some point over the years at different sorts of publicity, celebrity functions, different things like that. They've all seemed perfectly lovely. I never got to know any of them really well, but have enjoyed my interactions with them. You went on to say, let's see, did any of the cast from either show for me? Yes. Did Little House ever come across the Waltons' radar in any way? Yes, of course. Was there ever any behind-the-scenes competition, even if something was said in jest? I think, yeah, in a good-natured way, there's a little, just the kind of competitiveness that makes you stay at the top of your game. It's like, oh wow, they're doing good things, and so we need to not rest on our laurels, and we need to do good things too. And so it was nothing more than that. There was certainly no animosity that I was ever aware of between the two shows. People continually get them mixed up. Can't tell you how many times people have said, oh yeah, I loved you on that show. What was it like working with Michael Landon? And it's like, oh, well, no, that was a different show. Or people saying, now, were you the one that went blind? It's like, no, different show. And one time I remember talking with, very briefly with Melissa Gilbert, and I said, look, this happens to us all the time. Does it happen to you? And she said, yes, all the time. So they are two shows. As you said, they were in different time periods, different sort of circumstances, but because they were both family shows, and I think a lot of people, if they loved one show, they loved the other show as well. So I understand that how they could be confused. I actually wrote a skit one time for a benefit that I was doing where these young people were kind of talking about me and having been on the Waltons, and they were confused about, oh, was that the one with the blind girl? And it's like, no, and what about the one? Anyway, so I had some fun with that at my own expense. I think you had, let's see, what else did you have here? I don't think this is something Rona Barrett ever covered, and if she did, I missed it. Wow, yeah, I remember those columns. There were certain people, yeah, and I don't know if it was Rona Barrett, but things would get printed in columns, and you go, where did that come from? It was completely not true. Things seemed completely invented. Yeah, I expect there was stuff in those columns that I didn't read, probably saying that there was some big rivalry going on and that we hated each other and stuff, but none of that was true. I have the greatest respect for all of them in the show, the lovely show that they created as well. This is from Joe, and he's talking about some of the driving sequences and how some of them, when the actors aren't really driving, there's hardly any semblance of realism because they're oversteering and things like that would be unbelievable. So he says, on another note, I've often wondered how sound, especially dialogue, is kept in sync when multiple camera angles are used. For example, you may get an over-the-shoulder shot of an actor as he begins his lines, but then switch to a close-up midway through. Since I believe the soundtrack was recorded on the film, I'd imagine there would be two different tracks of the actor's lines, and yet it doesn't sound like it. I'd love to know how that's handled. Although I'm not a sound editor, with some of the little bit of editing I've been involved in or seen happen or tried myself, I'm aware of some of the issues. And the sound would be recorded separately for each take that was done, whether it was a longer shot or a close-up or whatever. So which take of the sound was used might vary. I mean, they might take the sound from, obviously it needs to sync with the mouth, so they would need to use the sound that was there with the shot they were using. So they adjust levels. They will splice between words where they can. They will make choices about where they change that shot based on that. And then there's a way to just level all that sound out so that it all is consistent in terms of volume. If a person is further away, they may want that dialogue to sound like it's coming from further away. So all those types of things are techniques that they can do in the sound editing. And someone with far more expertise than I would have to get into the intricacies of that. I hope that helps. This one, the moniker is Hi. Okay, here we go. Do you think, or would any of you consider doing a reunion show? That's hard to say. I think we would. I think it would really depend on what it was. It would be different. The older ones having grandkids of their own. To me, that should have been the remake of the Waltons. I may be wrong, but wouldn't that put the new one time set about the time this one was made in the 70s? For me, I think putting the Walton characters in the 70s, I don't know. I don't know that would work. I think the charm of the show to me was the era we were in, the 30s and 40s, and those simple struggles at that time. Not that they were simple, but the times were simple. And there was no technology. It was just, the focus could be on the family and those relationships and the family needing to pull together through those times. And by the time you get to the 70s, I think people are more scattered. I think, if you were trying to introduce younger members of the family, the audience doesn't know them. I don't know that they would gravitate to them quickly. So I think there's challenges in doing all that, which very well may be why someone hasn't jumped on doing that. But I think if a really clever idea were presented, who knows? It could still happen. And I really appreciate that there's still so much interest in that and in wishing that the remaining cast could get together and do that. It would be fun for us just because we so love working together and being together. So thank you so much to all of you who have continued to keep the Waltons alive and are watching it all these 50 years later. Question from Teresa, who said, thank you for answering my question about extras. You're very welcome. But now I have another extras question. There's a woman who was in several scenes in some episodes in season 1 through 5 and was usually seen in the church or the churchyard, most notably in the Rebellion scene, season 5, when Reverend Fordwick decided to have Grandma share church organ duties, that she walked by when Grandpa and Mrs. Brimmer were on the porch and Grandma had seen them. And then again at the end of the episode. I looked back to see who that actress was that you were referring to. And although unfortunately I don't remember her name, she was one of our regular background extras who quite frequently did episodes of the Waltons. So when we had scenes where we needed people in the church, people in the community, she was on a short list of people that they would call to see if she was available. And if she was, she would come work for us. So it was great to see a lot of the same faces. And we did in the church, in the school, in the community, at county fairs, at different functions like that. A question from Randy, who asked, was it more fun to go to work at the studio or out on location? It kind of depended. I enjoyed the locations because it was different. At the studio, you kind of, it's like, sometimes it felt like same old, but it was more work to go on location. I think I enjoyed the locations when periodically we stayed over. So again, it was fun. It was a new experience. Since the Waltons, I've worked on a lot of other things and done a lot of work on location. And there's new things to explore and new areas. And people are always fascinated when you come into their area to film. So you get to experience that and interact with people who maybe aren't around filming very much. So that gives it a new energy. But it can be really convenient to just show up and know the routine. It depends on the circumstances. Your other question was, what were the dressing rooms like on both? Typically, when you were away on location, they were much smaller because they couldn't take as many big trailers out. Not that we had big trailers. It changed over the years for us, for the kids. Initially, we had just small dressing rooms on the soundstage, which was good and bad. It was good because it was right there. It was bad because you always had to be quiet in your dressing room if they were filming. If you had a dressing room that was some sort of a little trailer outside, then you could go to your dressing room and talk and make noise and stuff. And so then there was a point where we did all have trailers. We didn't have really big trailers. For the kids, we didn't have trailers with bathrooms or kitchens or anything like that. But someplace you could go and sit and relax a bit, read a book, whatever, take some time away from set. On location, they had these big long trailers, and tended to have these small little spaces where you pretty much just went in and changed, and you could sit and maybe there actually was, a toilet in there or a sink or something, but, not much room at all. I have worked on other shows where I did have rather nice large trailers, and I used to joke that those were usually the shows where I only worked for a day or two. It's like, I want to stick around here because I have this lovely big dressing room. But I found the same thing in theater. I've worked in some lovely theaters where I had a wonderful dressing room and people to help me with my hair and my wardrobe. And then other times I'm like changing in a closet because that's all the room we have. So I'm pretty adaptable. I go with what I have there and try to make the best of it. I love the work. So to me, it's not necessarily about all the bells and whistles, but it's nice to have them if they're there. A question from Paige, who said, I was wondering if you had any advice on taking acting classes. Oh gosh, it kind of depends on where you live. Obviously, if you were in Los Angeles, there's all kinds of great acting teachers out here. Same thing in New York, and probably most of the more prominent casting centers. I do know these days with Zoom that more teachers have moved their classes to online. So I think you could probably do some hunting around. In terms of acting class, it really kind of depends on what you're looking to do. Ideally you want someone who helps you give your most natural performance. That's not a caricature, that's not over the top, that's really built from the inside and really what's going on with that character so that what comes forth seems just like someone's talking. I mean, we hear that about the work on the Waltons all the time, that we just seem like a real family and we really were just having conversations with each other. So you're always looking for that. So if you feel that someone is encouraging you to, be bigger and bolder and, you can make bold choices without having to do work that then becomes unreal. So I think that's the biggest advice I'd have for it. And whether you do scene study or whether you do on camera or audition technique, things like that, they're all good, and it'll really just depend on what helps you grow best as an actor. That's what I have for you for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons Ask Judy. I will be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons episodes and more Ask Judy. Thank you so much for watching.